Hello, and welcome to the Meta Woman podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay the Boss Poss, and I am so excited to be the host of this podcast. Together, we're going to have conversations about what it's like to be a woman in the gaming industry. From struggle to success, we're covering it all. Join me and a whole range of amazing guests as we dive into conversations and explore what it means to be a woman in gaming. For our women listeners, we hope that you can find a way to connect with this material, and for our male listeners, we hope that you enjoy hearing a different perspective and are open to learning something new. So I'm so excited to introduce our very first guest. Many of you may be familiar with her work at Sugar Gamers, and if not, definitely go check it out. Keisha Howard, founder of Sugar Gamers and self-proclaimed Geek of All Trades, is joining us for today's episode. Keisha has been in the video game industry and an enthusiast since childhood, and after discovering that a considerable part of the industry's consumers' professional demographics were not represented, Keisha created Sugar Gamers. It began as a women's advocacy and networking group for consumers and professionals, but eventually blossomed into an organization that advocated for all demographics who were underrepresented or underserved by the gaming industry, such as minorities, people from the LGBTQ+ community, and more. I will note that we hope to follow the same model, so thank you, Keisha, for being the first and inspiring me. We are definitely starting with women gamers, as the aptly named Meta Woman podcast notes, but eventually we want to expand that conversation to talk about all kinds of different groups within the gaming industry. So Keisha, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. And could you just start with a little background for the audience on what you do in your work in the gaming industry?
Oh, yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I am so happy to still be having these conversations. And also, I'm surprised, right? It's been 12 years for me. I started this in 2009, and I'm just super stoked that it still has impact. But also, it's still, a lot of things to do. There's a lot of work to be done. So the work that I do consists of consulting, community management, sort of a lot of research into emerging technologies, research and development in general, and things of that nature. So anything about like how technology impacts people and brings them together are things that I am very interested in, and that's how I work with the different companies that I tend to work with.
Gotcha. Can you share a little bit about Sugar Gamers specifically? I know there's 3 major projects on Sugar Gamers. I just really want the audience to have a chance to know how they can connect with all this good stuff you have going on.
Oh yeah. Sugar Gamers as a community, like we want to come full circle, right? So obviously we want to advocate for inclusivity in the gaming space, because gaming is just it's such a beautiful kind of industry to be in. I mean, yes, it has its challenges, but play is how we develop, is how we connect, is how we escape, is how we relax, is how we learn, is so many other things that impact how we think and how we communicate with one another. So some of the things that Sugar Gamers does, in the before times, we used to have a lot of in-person events. So it was interesting that gaming in person gave me a lot more insight to some of the challenges that people were having as gamers themselves, some of the reasons why they felt isolated, and some things that you don't necessarily get to see if you're only doing things online. Since the pandemic, we've had to find other ways to connect, but we're slowly but surely getting back to definitely like this humanity first, sort of in-person, communication safely and not in large groups, obviously.
Right.
But we're definitely that's our authentic nature. So it's not huge, but like I know everyone, I've touched everyone, and we all try to, with that kind of camaraderie, we're constantly trying to support one another. So Sugar Gamers is where people go to begin their journey in gaming, or to find support for their personal projects, or to sort of recalibrate after feeling like they're not represented, or their opportunities are missed when they try traditional routes in gaming. So one of my team members called it like the island of misfit kids. That's super fun because like we're not a trendy group. We don't have like millions of followers. We're not traditional content creators in that way, but we're always looking to do things differently and sort of expand our portfolio in different ways. One of those things are creating games ourselves. So we have a game called Project Violation, for example, and we're starting it from scratch, completely analog.
So cool.
So right now, right now it's a tabletop RPG. We all cosplayed as characters. Hold on one second. Sorry about that. It's a tabletop RPG where we all cosplay the characters that are represented in the game, and we're solving problems of the future in this sort of solar punk, cyberpunk world. And eventually, what we want to do is make that into a video game. And by doing this process, we're understanding how to be a producer, how to be a narrative designer, how to be an art director, and all these components that go into making a video game, so that we're always having a conversation about the expanded opportunities that exist in this space. Because if you're just like online, you might not necessarily get to understand that pathway. But with Sugar Gamers, we're definitely like, hey, you want to help out? You want to be a part of this? Like, let's go, let's play. So Project Violation is one of the things that we're working on. We're also working on Sugar Gamers Labs, which is a workforce pipeline solution, which I know a lot of companies are. But by us sort of being in the communities that we're representing and advocating, we really sort of understand where some of the hiccups are, especially when hiring, right? So in the last several years, the video game industry, rather, has had two major issues. The first one is, obviously, the industry hasn't always been inclusive. And in addition to that, it's been toxic towards certain demographics.
Yeah.
And that is
an understatement.
Right now. Right. And right now that's being, sort of course corrected slowly but surely, but it's a huge problem that is being tackled. What is being less talked about is that during the pandemic, the video game industry exploded, and now all these video game companies are being taken seriously. There's all these jobs that are available, but the standard systems and procedures that you use to find talent just aren't going to work, because this explosion happened almost overnight.
Right.
So finding people to fill these roles has been exceptionally difficult, because the industry not only has to over-index on skill talent, but they have to also be, inclusive of all sorts of types of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how do you do that? And how do you do that in an authentic way that's not pandering, that's not, harmful to people, and that helps people break into the industry if they don't have traditional methods of having gained that experience. Like, a lot of people are self-taught.
Right.
A lot of people live in places that aren't like video game meccas. It's like, a lot of times when we're talking about video games, we're like, LA, New York,
yeah,
Austin, like,
as someone representing DC, I understand that. Yeah.
Yes. So you understand, like, it's like the Midwest and the South, and sort of the middle of mid-America,
Right.
usually is not represented. It's like, if you're not in a major city, people forget about the people that are in small towns and that don't have access to going to downtown and seeing like a I don't know what companies to mention, but you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're living in San Francisco.
Going to a land center or something. Yeah, there's not a lot of, I get what you're saying. There's not a lot of touch points, I guess, for people to actually explore the gaming industry in a way that there's, you could walk down the street and like spit and hit 5 of them. So in LA. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Right. When I first traveled to San Francisco and I met so many people that worked in the gaming industry, I was just shocked. And I'm like, you guys have this?
Where y'all have been hiding. I see.
Right? Like, in Chicago, I still, after 12 years, I'm just like, yeah, I work in gaming. And people are like, what? And I'm like, we still doing this? Okay. So, back to the original statement of, like, sort of what we do is, essentially, we try to solve problems in really solution-oriented ways. So our model is create, not complain. And sort of, writing ourselves in, telling our own stories, and finding pathways that work for different types of individuals. Because what works for someone like, a ninja is
Right.
not going to work for somebody, else. In those sorts of pathways are now so oversaturated, they no longer work in the way that they used to. So we have to constantly push forward and sort of think of new ways to incorporate different types of people in the industry. So that brings us to our third thing, which is consulting.
Mm-hmm.
So we consult different companies on how to authentically reach the communities that they haven't been able to. Because another thing about location is, if you grow up in a place where, everybody's homogenous, and you go to school with people, you're going to be most comfortable with that. So how do you sort of expand knowing different people? And it's out of your comfort zone, and it's awkward. And
Yeah.
how do people in big companies who have to make return on their investment have an authentic approach to developing their talent and helping them break into the industry? So yeah, so we make games, we find workforce solutions for different companies, and we consult on how to be more inclusive and just inclusivity strategies in general. And then we play games. So,
The most fun part, I'd
it is.
say. But no, actually, all of it's kind of fun. I mean, there's a lot of different threads to pull on here. One thing I'd love to hear from you, and something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, is there is a tendency for companies to hire on people in minority groups or have minority status, and then sort of, once they're there, it's like, okay, the job's done. Now we don't, like, we did the thing, we got the press. Now we don't need to use their voice as much as it would be helpful to. Good. Everything okay?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, no
All right,
problem. I
all back.
recognize that. But yeah. Okay, so
Okay.
just to go back real quick. So, one thing that I find is that companies will hire people and they'll say, we want to bring a fresh perspective, we want to bring change, and then they bring in that fresh perspective, they bring in that change, and they're like, I just wanted to do the hire and have it look good on paper. And now that you're here, I'm not so into hearing this voice. So, for people who are getting into the pipeline, and I like that this is all a balancing act, right? Because I like that what was it, progress, not complaints?
Create, not complain.
Create, not complain. There it is. I couldn't quite remember. I like that attitude. On sort of, I guess, the flip side of that, how do you encourage people who are stuck in positions where they're not empowered to speak up? What advice or what strategies can you give to people who may have been, I don't know, just kind of stuck in a tough spot where they're not necessarily being listened to in the way that you would hope?
Um, and that's difficult, right? Because at some point, when you feel like you don't have a voice, you get very discouraged, and you believe that you're alone. And that's the biggest issue there. It's like this belief that no one else can quite understand a specific challenge and why you remain quiet or what you're risking. And even if a person isn't sort of this extroverted character that's going to be tweeting and all this other stuff, I think it's so important to find others that have the same challenges,
Mm-hmm.
because you're just not alone, and it's more power in numbers, number one.
Right.
And there are so many people advocating for change in certain areas that if you're not speaking up, support the people that do. And this is difficult, right? Because
Right.
gaming is all about fun, and it should be a fun place until someone gets hurt. So I think right now is a time where, when people say that they want to see change, or they believe that things should be different, then your time, your money, and your energy should go towards that in some way. Even if you're not representing it, then there should be some sort of tangible thing that you do toward the change that you want to see. So a lot of us, I believe, especially with social media, it's really easy to get discouraged, because you're reading all these things on social media, you're feeling your very personal experience that you're not
Right.
potentially sharing with others, and then you feel like helpless and alone. but we're still like supporting people who aren't also putting time, money, and effort toward those changes that you want to see. So
Mhm.
it's like you can't like say that, feel alone, and then support what just entertains you. We have to do the work and
Yeah.
really put effort toward making sure that we contribute to something that we believe is good. Like an example is, it's like, oh, if I could compare it to like something different, is people who just don't have a full circle approach to sustainability. Like, global warming, but they're a litterer, right? And it's
Mhm.
like no one understands how I feel about global warming, but they're not doing anything intentional to do their part to be a
Mhm.
part of the solution. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does.
you
That
know,
was the exact example I was going to use as someone who, there's all these things about climate doom, and that's sort of a topic for another day. But I will say, I think I just bought a sweatshirt from Target for the first time in, gosh, 2 or 3 years, just because I've always been, small business, organic cotton, this, that. And I was just in Target picking up something else that couldn't be bought in small businesses, and I bought this sweatshirt, and I called a friend afterwards, and I was like, it just gets so tiring to never participate in the modern economy, right?
I
But I
mean,
think it's okay to give yourself grace. I don't have any regrets, and I know I take it to an extreme that is not feasible for a lot of people on a lot of budgets, and I'm extremely fortunate to have the privilege to do things like always buy organic cotton sweatshirts. But it was nice in that moment just to be like, oh, this is what it's like.
And,
Oh,
and I think it's important, like you said, to not only give yourself grace, but understand that we're constantly being bombarded with messages that we have to that we're going to be conflicted by, right?
oh
And
yeah.
not to go deviate too much into that, but it's like it. Once you start building those habits, you do feel fulfillment in being more connected to yourself, because I think that a lot of sort of consumer marketing,
Hmm.
influencer marketing, kind of makes us feel like, oh man, we lack something when we're actually very abundant and very powerful.
Yes, I
So
love that.
but yeah, if you feel like you don't have a voice, you do, and other people feel similarly,
Hmm.
and you just got to put a little bit of effort into the power of numbers, and yeah, time, money, and resources is definitely where it's at.
Yes, I completely agree with that, and I love that as a thread. Could you just speak a little bit more about what Sugar Gamers Lab is doing in order to help people get ready and get into the workforce in gaming?
Right. So I think right now, like we're over indexing in our media on certain topics like content creator and esports and pro gaming and you know the cryptocurrencies and the metaverse and NFTs and like
Hmm.
things of that nature. What's Phase Clan doing? What's these groups of people doing? And it's great. It's very exciting that these things exist, and we live in very exciting times as gamers because, like, finally, if you've been a gamer for a while, for it to be taken seriously, for it to be so
Yeah.
lucrative, seeing these things is exciting. However, that's just like the tip of the those memes where you have the tip of the iceberg
Oh yeah.
above the water and then below the water there's a whole like mountain. That's where I am. I'm like below the tip of the iceberg as far as like what our public discourse is. So like on the one hand, it's like there are a lot of perks to being visible and having vanity metrics and having a million, Twitch subscribers and, a million Instagram followers. And that's great. But that doesn't represent all of us as gamers. Gamers is the largest and most diverse consumer market that exists, I
Hmm.
believe. I might be wrong, but I believe it's
If
that.
not, it's at least in the top two or three. So, you
Exactly.
know.
So like people would ask me why don't you stream, and I know that for branding purposes that it probably would be super smart of me to stream. I would probably do all right, but it's inauthentic to how I play games. I play games crusty, Lindsay. I play games lost.
Yeah, tell me about that. I want to hear about it because we both put
I
on our
like
nice
roll
little
out of
floral
bed.
tops today. Yeah. This is not the norm.
Like I have a sheet that got cat fur on it, maybe some Dorito crumbs. I have like a beer, and I'm just like, finally, a moment to myself to escape into a world, and like maybe it's Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like
Mhm.
I love that game and just escaping and not talking to anybody, but just saving the world and just for a minute not
Yeah.
having to be myself, worrying about a job, worrying about the way that I communicate on a day to day. And so, like, even though streaming is cool to me, it's inauthentic to the way that I game because I'm an introvert gamer. Like, I'm just an introvert gamer. And, like, even though I want to be everywhere, that's not necessarily the appeal
Right.
to a person like me. But, like I said earlier, to earlier questions, like, there's more than one person like me. And those people typically hold different jobs in gaming. They own esports teams, maybe. Like, you don't know who they are necessarily. They are narrative designers, they're audio programmers,
Mhm.
they're character designers, they're animators, they're storyboarders, they're doing all these other things that aren't put on a pedestal. Like, I meet people that have just astounding godlike talent, and we don't know who they are
Mhm.
because their time, instead of like doing marketing and self-promotion, is spent on what they love, what their craft is, which is maybe art or programming, coding, engineering, the back end stuff that
Right.
we enjoy as gamers, but we don't think about it, right? We don't think about how games are developed. We think about our own sort of experience playing them and the people that we're friends with or have parasocial
Yeah.
relationships with, who we watch streaming, so on and so forth.
That's
As
so
the
true.
the industry, hmm?
That's just so true. Yeah. I mean, with any product, it's like you don't think much about who really made it. But yeah, I don't know that I feel like that's any better or worse in gaming, but it is different because people are so connected with the content when they're playing it or when they're watching it, and then there's like this complete disconnect between like who made it and what life is like for that person. Not complete.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say complete disconnect because that's totally putting down a lot of people who do pay attention to that. But in my own experience and anecdotally, it's like I don't sit back and think about all the little pieces that go into it.
yeah, and there's so many little pieces, and that's where Sugar Gamers Labs comes in. Um,
I love that.
what our goal is to like sort of humanize that, like, humanize all the things that you don't see, that's not going to get the vanity metrics, that's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be the super entertaining thing. But also, if we tell those stories and you get to hear those stories from the people that bring you your entertainment, that develop it, that create it, then it also expands how people think about their opportunities in the space. Because again, being a content creator or pro gamer is very lofty to
Right.
become successful, right? But like, being a back end engineer, like, that's very possible and very lucrative. Being a narrative designer, that is very much a career that
Mm-hmm.
can be gotten, and you can work in games, and it could be fulfilling, and it could be fun, and you could still be in the space. And I just want to humanize and highlight those individuals a lot more, so we can expand the conversation instead
Right.
of constantly just sort of giving all the limelight to our favorite sort of content creators, which is great. Like, I just
Right.
think there's
Yeah.
room for more.
I like that
I'm not
approach.
in
Yeah.
any way thinking that what's happening is bad. I just room for more expansion, and with that expansion comes messaging about more opportunities. So now people sort of understand what they need to do within their personality or within their, sort of tool set,
Mm-hmm.
what they need to learn. A lot of these things on game development are free. Like, you can download Unreal if you have a gaming PC and learn how to develop in Unreal, and it's free. It takes time, it takes effort, but a lot of the things that create the games that we think are amazing are things that we can do at home with the dedication and commitment to what it is that we want to learn. And I just want that to be just as sexy and exciting and accessible as
Yeah.
making affiliate on Twitch. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
So
I like the idea of that. Well, especially one of the themes that I've been coming back to as I've started thinking about this podcast too is imposter syndrome. And for me, I felt this. I went to a very technical university. I went to one where engineering, computer science were heavily focused on, and that's not a bad thing at all. But I was in the I graduated with the degree in behavioral economics and was more on the decision sciences side of things, kind of psych, kind of econ. And I didn't always feel like I had the same opportunities as my peers. And I've come to find out that's just absolutely not true. And so I think that this idea that you have to be, a high level software engineer to make it is just not true. And that's something that I've actually grappled with getting onto the job market and stuff. And I don't think that the job market does a great job of encouraging people who are not software engineers, but that's a whole separate issue. But how do you think about that in the work that you put out and stuff? And how do you think about like this accessibility portion of like, you know, I know that not everybody can do everything, but I do think that people, when given confidence, can do more than they think they can do. And so how does that kind of play into what you're creating and how you think about these tools that you put out there?
well, I mean, basically, for me personally, I don't know if this will resonate with other people. Uh, I invest in people, so my return on investment is people. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're going into this and you're just like, oh man, I want to work in gaming, and one of the most highly competitive industries that there is, regardless of the problems that there are. Like, it's basically like working in Hollywood, right? You want to work on Star Wars. You think that everybody doesn't want to work on Star Wars? You're going to have to be excellent and you're going to have to stand out. And that effort is just going to have to be put into your approach to that regardless, right? With that being said, I feel like a lot of people sort of overemphasize validation through money, or validation through big companies, or validation through this sort of success metric that is going to lend itself to a lot of rejection along the way, especially if you come from a demographic that doesn't have those tools sort of integrated into your community, right? Um, so your reason, your purpose for wanting to pursue whatever you want to pursue should reside in that you want to do it, like regardless of money. It's a feast or famine sort of approach to it, but like, yeah, at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure that the community that I came from, like, I represented that in an authentic way. So I'm from the South Side of Chicago, and I am. I grew up in like the '90s, early 2000s. So the discourse that we're having right now is not something that was available to me at all. Like, it didn't even, no one told me I couldn't work in games. It's not like there was like some dude at the door of the gaming like, no women allowed. Like, none of that happened. But also, there was no representation of women or people of color. There was no education, pathways to in the school that I was in at the time, or in the college that I went to later. So, like, I made it past my whole adolescence, all my formative years, and after college, never having the discourse that we're having today, that is available for everyone, that we can't get away from right now. Um, with that being said, it's important to know like how you're going to sort of navigate this space. And if you're not ready for the rejection, if you're not ready for trial and error, if you're not ready for the failure at times, then this is going to be a very difficult thing. This is not a easy industry to just show up and it's easy. And again, the way our media works, we see all of these young, beautiful people that are just adored by the masses with their hundreds of thousands, if not millions of likes and followers, and their new clothes and jackets representing the companies and brands that love them so much. Like, if you think that that is easy, number one, you are mistaken. But it looks effortlessly. It looks effortless. It looks like, oh man, it's just 100% fun every step of the way. No, I mean, can I use profanity here? This shit hard. Did you hear the claps? This shit is hard. It is challenging, and I don't know who it's easy for, but most of the people that I've spoken to, it is not an easy. It's not an easy path, but it's worthwhile. It's something that if you have a lot of passion, dedication, commitment, and resilience, like you're going to be successful. But it takes those key components, and anybody who's a gamer, I feel like inherently should have these components.
You
because
could try the same thing over and over and over. Smash your keyboard 1,000 times. Yeah. I get
exactly.
it. Yeah.
So like you gotta be used to losing, but it's worth it in the end because you get to where you're going. You level up. And yes, it is. There are times that it's discouraging. There are times that it's freaking unfair. It's very unfair for different types of people for different reasons. So there's a lot to it. But yes, I think that with Sugar Gamers Labs, we are just going to expand ways that we can navigate it so people aren't sort of just thinking that there's only these 5 ways to be in gaming when there's so many more. And there's ways that you can be very successful and have great paying careers. It's just not as visible.
Yeah. Well, I like that. That kind of goes hand in hand with what you talked about earlier with like finding a community or finding a support system where you feel comfortable. Because you're right. The reality is it's not going to be easy. There's definitely going to be people that detract and that make it harder. You're going to deal with crappy bosses like everyone does. It's going to be tough. So it's important. I do think that goes hand in hand with, finding the right communities, finding the right support system, figuring out your own way and your own path to that comfort, but like continuing to still take steps forward. Like you can't get discouraged. You can just say like, okay, done with this job, or I'm going to look for something else because of this, or I'm going to find a lateral transfer, something. Like I think that those go hand in hand. Like it's very easy to get down when things are hard. And it's okay to feel sad, but it's not okay to like stand still and just wallow. You got to continue. Tiny steps, big steps, whatever the steps are, like just keep going.
Yeah, and with grace. And it's important to know the difference between failing and feeling like a failure. We don't need to feel like a failure. Gaming it should be a fun sort of career path. And but yeah, there are challenges. Sometimes you got to find unorthodox approaches to level up. You have to be creative. You have to stand out. You have to find a very specific flavor of how you do this. And it's just where it's at. Like on the one hand, like, yeah, as a woman and as a person of color, there have been things that have been unfair and difficult. But if I would have let that stop me, I wouldn't, be here with some of the successes that I have had. But people only, I do it. We all do it. We put our highlight reel on social media, but this did not come without sacrifice. So, and I'm not saying that everybody should, but it definitely seems to be prevalent in this journey. So, if you're shying away from it, if you're shying away from that hardship, this might not be for you to pursue. But I'm hoping, again, with the approach that we're taking, that we can pinpoint other ways that are less scrutinized. It's like, hey, I look at my portfolio, look at all these characters I created, look at my code, look at, and then it kind of moves past it because your work speaks for itself.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I want to shift gears a little bit because I want to get back to something that you said in the very beginning. When you talked about how you incorporate play into Sugar Gamers and what you do, and that actually reminded me, I, funnily enough, in grad school had to write a final essay on what play meant to me, which is the exact opposite of anything involving play, writing an essay about it. But I would love to hear, because you cover a lot of stuff in Sugar Gamers that's so fun. You cover a lot of anime and cosplay and like all kinds of different things. And I know you talked about the Bitcoin and crypto and NFTs and designing games, but what about the fun stuff? Tell me about that.
To me, it's all a little fun. I guess the way I talk about it, it's like Sugar Gamers is like that mandatory training that you got to take before you get into the game. But like once you get into it, it's freaking fun, right? You can't just pick up a game all the time, just know how to play it. So we have, that 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 banter, and then on top of that, play for me, um, it means like really connecting and interacting with people with the common interest, and we can just have banter like this super fun competition. Like one of our members, his name is Chris McClure. Like he's always ragging on me, but because I know him in person, it's playful. It's like, oh, you're not gonna do this, like, and it's nice when it's not harmful and you have that extra connection of humanity, which is slower process. It's a slower process to develop and maintain these human relationships. But then I have like all these people to play with, like think about matchmaking in a game, right? And you're just like, oh, I hope a matchmake. Yeah, I got a good team. Well, there's another way to matchmake, which is when you meet people, you maintain those relationships. You put energy and effort into like really knowing a person, the back and forth, the sharing. To me, that's fun because it's like building something together. It's like having blocks, and it's like, oh, you got this block, you can put it here, and now we have this whole, castle or something like that. But I think it's really fun to play with other people. I think it's really fun to like just be active, in ways that feel human. So as much as like we're talking about all these things, like, oh, we're gonna live in these virtual worlds, I'm hoping that if that does happen, when we take the headset off, when we put the controller down, it translates to a positive behavior in which we're playful with one another in a way that's positive and enriching instead of like toxic and harmful.
What an idea.
Yeah.
That seems so natural. It's just like, it's so funny how when things evolve and over time, how that message gets lost. And I think as people, we've been through a pandemic. It's been a really rough year. I would just love for everyone to be able to sit down and pop on a headset and like remember what it's like to form connections and build things together.
Yeah, I mean, and that was, the reason why I'm just like, oh, let's play together. It's so fun, is because like before Twitch, which is when I was a gamer, before all these things, sort of became part of our public discourse, play meant just, hey, you like this game? I like this game too. Let's play it together. Like, that's so cool, right? And the reason you played together wasn't to get metrics on Twitch. It wasn't to like showcase who your cool friends are. It wasn't to make money. It wasn't all these external things that we have put on top of gaming. It was like, man, I just get to play games with my friends. Like, remember that? Like,
I think we did it like in middle school when we had calculators, It was like, what games can we put in our calculators? And you had the little cord. Do you remember that? You had the little cord that connected them.
Oh man, you taking it back.
Yes. It was fun.
Like, I'm still to this day a fan of couch co-op. I like love playing Rocket League couch co-op with split screen, which probably makes no sense when you could just play online. But like, I like, pushing people and be like, I don't care if you won, like there's that humanity. I don't know how it's going to translate in the virtual space or the digital space, but I want to explore that, and I want to maintain the play part before we over index on the return on investment monetarily. How many viewers did we have? Did we get any biddies? Did anybody subscribe? You know what I'm saying? It's like, remember when we just played the game?
I know. Well, it's funny to see, along that line, it's funny to see, and I felt this resurgence in board games. And it's like, oh, like we can do an activity that's not watching TV, and like we can be competitive and have fun and all that. And it's like, yeah, now we just, like, now board games have gotten that idea. How do we move that onto gaming?
Yes. Yeah, but I feel like it's so healthy. It's so much more healthier to start there than to start in that competitive element
Yeah.
where you're constantly looking at metrics, you're constantly looking at numbers, you're constantly looking at money. And that's fun too to some people, but that, like I said, there's so many different types of gamers. Some gamers like stories, some gamers like art, some gamers like music, some gamers like, playing together, but like really, fun games like Mario Party
Me. That's me.
or things of that nature. Yeah,
Anytime you
I
want to
also
play
love
Mario Party,
Mario
let me
Party.
know.
Hell yeah. All right. But you get what I'm saying. It's I don't want to lose that magical part about like what brought me to gaming and doing the work that I do. I just know how transformative it is when you have friends and you can sit down and connect with them in a playful way instead of like also connecting it to, your career
Mhm.
opportunities,
Yeah.
right? So it's like we to like kind of foundationally be like, oh, I would do this for free. And for years I did Sugar Gamers for free. Like I didn't make a lot of money with the company. There was not a lot of revenue coming in. I usually had like one or two jobs while navigating Sugar Gamers, and it was brutal. But the reason I did it was because it's like, oh man, like, all the cool women I got to connect with, all the cool
Right.
people, the community is really nice, especially in person.
I'm
Um,
hoping we can get back to that
like
sometime soon.
I know, which is again why I want to really learn. Like last year I went to the Unreal Fellowship and learned how to sort of use the Unreal Engine, and
Very
I'm
cool.
learning different elements of game development in general. I am working with a game development company now, and the game development part of it is really cool too, because now you're creating something that you see puts a smile on people's face, and people are super excited to be a part of it, and that's really cool too. To like create something that people love is really nice. It has a very good feeling. So which I understand is also kind of measurable with metrics, but kind of not the same as
It's
like, oh, you
different.
see,
Yeah. Well,
it's
I've had
different,
this problem too of measuring. Like, there is this tendency, I think, for sure, to want to measure sentiment and want to measure feeling. And I understand that tendency because it's like on the other end, it's not just about ROI when you're trying to measure sentiment, right? You're trying to feel for yourself why you're in an organization, why you're in a company, why you're pursuing a campaign, whatever it may be. Measuring sentiment can feel really good and can give you good direction, but it also, not everything is quantitative, and not all of it is even qualitative. Sometimes you just do stuff just because you should, and just because it makes you feel good, and that's it. And I like this idea of kind of getting back to that. And we obviously can't make 100% of the world run on sentiment. I'm fully aware of that. But adding just like a little dose of, oh, I don't know, this feels good and it's a good idea because it feels good would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, because you're right. These sorts of things can't, you just can't stamp a number on it. Like, who judges that? And then as soon as we do that, it seems like it's so hackable. It's so like, you can manipulate it in ways that are authentic. So some of it is like just, we have to bank on some intuition. We have to bank on some of our personal feelings about some of the matters and examine it and
Mhm.
deconstruct it. Not necessarily go out and think that whatever makes you uncomfortable is wrong, but examine why you feel that way, and then put your time, money, and resources behind creating something that does feel good. So yeah, that's where we are, and it's exciting times.
Oh, it is. All right, I am going to quickly summarize and then ask my last question, which is something that I want to do on every show. But just as a quick summary for our listeners, Keisha wants to remind you to create and not complain, which I love. Use your dollars, your effort, your voice to send a message. And if you feel like you're alone, you're not. Find a group that supports you. Your purpose in hunting a job or finding a career or any of that should be that you want to do it. You got to be ready for rejection. You got to be ready for trial and error and difficulties, but you got to push through. And as she eloquently said, and I agree with, this shit is hard, and it is hard. But it's important to know the difference between failing and feeling like a failure, which is really key. And the last thing I want to remind everyone is that doing stuff for fun is super okay. And in fact, you can do anything you want for fun, and you can make friends along the way, which is just a beautiful reminder for all of us. Okay, so my last question, not that we stuck to any of my questions or script, which is completely fine, and this is something for everyone that I want to ask at the end of every one of these podcasts. And I just want to hear a moment of reflection from you. So what is one thing you would like to tell your younger self about getting into the gaming industry and being successful?
Oh man, I probably would tell my younger self, take her by the shoulders and shake her, right, and tell her like, dude, why are you waiting for someone to tell you what to do? Why are you waiting for someone to validate your work? Just do it. Like, and it wasn't completely my fault. Like, I tell my younger self, it's not your fault. You were told to go to school so teachers can give you an A.
Mm-hmm.
You were told to get a good job so your boss can tell you you did a good job, so you can make money. But really, what is it that I want to? What did I want to do? What did you want to do? And if I would have just known that I could have been doing what I'm doing now when I was younger, I would have been a different person. I would have had a different trajectory in life. So I don't regret how everything turned out. But if I did have it all to do over again, I wonder how it would have felt to have the confidence in myself, to have self-validation as a foundation for my actions instead of like constantly looking for external praise,
Yep.
external acceptance, external like, oh, could someone like me? Could someone tell me I'm doing a good job? Can someone, do something to let me know I'm going in the right direction? Instead of like kind of looking a little bit more inward and feeling if I am content with where I'm going. Do I like this even? And there have been, and sometimes we don't know
Right.
unless we have trial and error. But yeah, I wish I would have just not been so. I emphasized external validation a lot, and after I figured out I didn't have to do that, that's when my life changed.
What a great note to end on. I love that. Yeah. Self-validation. You don't need anybody else?
I mean, like, no, just start it
Yeah.
there. You definitely do need
I'm
other people.
being hyperbolic on purpose. I think if women swung in the direction of like being overly self-validated, it would be a good thing. So I think we're starting from the extremely external, and I want to swing it all the way to the other direction, and then maybe we can go to the middle.
It'll just even out a little
over
bit.
time. But yeah, I like that idea of internal confidence, and that's something that I completely agree with you, and you said very well, and definitely something I wish I could have shared with my younger self. So thank you so much for all of this, and thank you for coming on. I can't wait to have you back. This was so fun. Yeah.
Woo woo!
We'll coordinate our outfits for
Lindsay,
next time, too.
the boss. And what you said?
Yeah, we'll coordinate our outfits for next time, too. Long sleeve florals, always in season. But thank you so much, and I look forward to having you again.
Thank you so much. I can't wait for our next conversation. What is it going to be about?
Gosh, you need to give me some time to plan. Although I still have a bunch of notes from this episode, I guess.
Gaming in outer space.
I would very much like to cover that, yes.
When the world melts and you're gaming on your
Yeah.
spaceship.
Yeah, basically.
Anyway.
So yeah. To all of our listeners, thanks so much, and we hope you'll tune in again next week.